So welcome to the National Council of Faculty Senate's Fall 2025 webinar on academic freedom. I'm Catherine Ott-Walter, and I am the president of the National Council of Faculty Senates. I am also speaker of the Faculty Senate at James Madison University and associate professor in health sciences at JMU. We have a packed agenda today. So I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer Lundquist, as long as she is here, from UMass-Amherst and co-chair of Stand Together for Higher Education. Jennifer?
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to put the Stand Together in the chat here so you can check it out. But yes, I'm very happy to be here. I'm a sociology professor at University of Massachusetts and Senior Associate Dean of Research and Faculty Development and co-founder of Stand Together, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But I just want to say that I am very honored to be here. I think that the work that faculty senates are doing is key to protecting academic freedom. And I have found Michael Burrowbay's work around this to be very compelling and instructive. The idea being that shared governance is not well understood, but it is a crucial component of academic freedom. He wrote that academic freedom lives or dies in governance structures, and I think that is absolutely true. And I believe that is very true for this council. And this is probably why you gathered together, I believe it was in 2018, to start working collectively. I will say that in our work with Stand Together, we have seen this time and time again, particularly with privates that we've worked with, where the lack of faculty governance has been really a huge weakness, an Achilles heel for the faculty. So we saw this firsthand when we met with the Harvard faculty. They don't have a university-wide faculty senate. Almost all of the power is consolidated among the corporation. And luckily, they are fighting the intervention and extortion from the federal government, but the faculty had no say in this. The faculty had no consultation in this at all. So I want to just very briefly go over the landscape of what's been happening in higher ed, because I think that the flood the zone strategy that has been such a key component of the federal administration has been so successful that it's sometimes really hard to have a bird's eye view of what has happened. So quickly, for the last 9 months since January, the government has launched a coordinated assault on higher education. It's been designed to intimidate and to publicly discredit and to defund higher education. Christopher Rufo argued early on that federal funding should be used to put universities into an existential terror, to discipline them. And that is exactly what the federal government is doing. This is a national crisis now, but it has been a creeping existential reality for years in many of your institutions here, located in states with more hostile legislatures to academic freedom. So there are essentially 6 things that have been happening. You're all familiar with them. I'm just going to summarize them. The dismantling of the scientific infrastructure through direct cancellation of grants and much more systemically through federal overhead reductions and grant indirects that pretty much wipes out a university's ability to do basic science. Number 2, the deliberate unraveling of the student loan system. Number 3, surveillance and deportation of our international students and scholars for their free speech and for their very existence here. Additional efforts to control admissions over international students have been underway, as well as to control hiring of faculty and staff with prohibitive H-1B visa fees of $100,000 or more. And then we have the carrot and the stick approach. This is essentially coercion versus extortion. So we had first the extortion, which is the civil rights investigations that were announced in the spring. These were civil rights probes for alleged violations at 60 universities, including my own, UMass-Amherst, which has essentially chilled free speech and autonomy. And we've seen with the 7 or 8 universities that have been directly impacted so far by this, that this has been a literal extortion and dictation of what these universities do, almost entirely unrelated to the original accusations of civil rights violations. Harvard has resisted, unlike Columbia and Brown. And then there's the carrot, that's the White House compacts. I'm sure we're all familiar with these at this point. This is preferential federal funding conditioned on ideological compliance and control. Again, all of this kind of deal making has been happening without the consultation of the faculty. Now, I just want to drop another link in here. In Stand Together for Higher Ed, we have been working with a number of other groups to crowdsource exactly to track what is happening with many of the deals that are happening. So we're looking at resistance statements from organizations. We have information on all the universities who were originally invited to join the compact and what their responses have been, if any, at this point, most of which have rejected it, although many have said maybe in some other format, and so negotiations are ongoing. And then we
The meeting is being recorded and we will post it on the National Council on Faculty Senate's website. For those of you interested in sharing it or viewing it again. All right, you're back. Yay.
So was I the only one? I was hoping everyone got disconnected, but apparently I am
Just you.
All right. There's work going on right outside of my window here on campus. So in any case, so you still have the link that I put in there. This is something that we've been working with the MATIC group, the Mutual Academic Defense Compact Faculty Senate collection of over 60 universities. And as they have been passing their resolutions, they have been posting their resolutions into this document. And we encourage everyone to consider passing a resolution that addresses the compact. Our recommendation at this point would be to not focus solely on the mailman specific compact, but generally on a resolution against making side deals with the government, any potential side deals, particularly without any consultation of the faculty and not in any kind of public forum. And there are templates in there. I encourage all of you to take a look at the language. You are welcome to borrow from it as much as you want. And we are working with one of our graduate students who's a data analytics expert to get kind of a map going with all of the different settlements and compact responses and playing that out visually over time to see what this looks like. So stay tuned, that will be on our website soon. And then finally, the sixth point that I want to make is the individual impacts of all of this, right? And so, individuals are very much impacted by the systemic changes at the federal level. For example, we are seeing firings and removal of faculty in Texas and Tennessee, for example, for recent social media posts about Charlie Kirk, for what faculty are teaching. There's the transgender topic in class in Texas. This morning, I just read in the Chronicle about Indiana, a professor who's been removed from the class for teaching about white supremacy. And then, of course, the dissolution of faculty governance bodies in Texas. So the attacks in higher education today are far, far broader than they were under McCarthyism. They are much more infused on multiple levels of the university. They're coming from every direction, and they are coordinated at the local, state, and federal level. And this is all kind of background for why we started the Stand Together for Higher Ed organization this past spring. We are a nonpartisan grassroots organization of faculty and staff. We have been seeding teams on campuses throughout the country. We're new, we're just starting, we're just getting started, but we've grown very fast. We recently got some funding from the Democracy Fund to be able to, pay for some of our infrastructure. We meet with our teams, our Stand Together teams, bi-monthly to strategize locally around their local context. And we have been especially focused on outreach to faculty and staff in Southern and Midwestern states who deal with hostile legislatures. We coordinate very closely with AAUP. Many of the teams that we're working with are climates where they wouldn't even feel comfortable starting an AAUP advocacy chapter, much less a union. If you don't have a Stand Together team on your campus, I am going to put a link here if you want to read more about it. We are all volunteers. It is completely free. This is just a public good that we want faculty to be able to take advantage of. Um, Trying to focus on talking and cutting and pasting at the same time. This is information, a toolkit on how campuses can start a stand together team. And, I think that stand together teams could work in very productive ways with Faculty Senate and getting out the word about what you're doing, and perhaps in also more creative ways, well beyond what the Faculty Senate is doing, and particularly when thinking about coalitions across other Faculty Senates and other teams. We're developing resources for faculty based on sort of grassroots desires that we've been hearing about. Most recently is a Reclaim the Narrative webinars that we've been running. This is a very simple idea, but it is very critical. It's essentially telling the truth about what it is that we all do every day in the university. Our argument is that our stories are themselves an act of resistance against the campaign of misinformation and propaganda that has been spreading throughout the public. And as a case in point, if you just take a look at any conservative newspaper, they have dedicated sections to higher ed. Fox News, for example, has the Campus Radicals section. Our mainstream legacy media does not have dedicated sections to higher ed. And in many ways, this is not surprising because we ourselves, I don't think, have realized until pretty recently that we actually have to make a case to the public for higher education. This is a whole new reality for us. So our Reclaiming the Narrative materials help faculty essentially learn how to write op-eds, make social media posts, et cetera, that really, whether through humor, but always through their personal stories, that make it very clear to the public around them how important higher education is. So this is a long end game. This is not something that's going to happen quickly, but it's something that we see as critical. So that's one thing that we're doing. If you're interested in running your own Reclaim the Narrative workshop at your institution, we can help you do that. We have materials, which I'll cut and paste later so that you can give it to whoever might be interested in running a Reclaim the Narrative. We're happy to meet with you. And I'm just going to end with a few questions. First, we at Stand Together would love to hear, how faculty senates and Stand Together might work together. We're curious about what your thoughts are on cross collaborations with other faculty senates, what about the mutual academic defense compacts, how that's worked or not worked for you. And we're really interested, and this is what we've done at UMass, is really the faculty senate has kind of reframed in the last decade or so to not change its activities, but rather incorporate the ethos of academic freedom front and center as part of the driving cornerstone of all of the work that we do. So we started an academic freedom task force at UMass through the faculty senate. And this is maybe 2021. And it was through this way that my committee and I were able to create a UMass Academic Freedom Crisis Toolkit, which I'm also happy to share with you. This essentially supports faculty when they're attacked for exercising their academic freedom around their classroom and their research. We make these materials, they're on our website at UMass. Other universities have adopted, the UC system has adopted them. I was just on the phone with Nebraska recently. Their administration is really interested in adopting them, and you're welcome to share them with your administration. And another thing that we did was to argue successfully for the overhaul of our current and outdated research misconduct processes. So what was happening is we had a website, and anyone, even anonymously, could lodge a complaint around plagiarism, misconduct, et cetera. The bar was very low, and it would instigate an investigation immediately without any kind of preliminary analysis. And so this was being weaponized as these things have been more and more in the last decade or so. And so, our faculty, our Academic Freedom Task Force, which has now been inculcated into the Faculty Senate as a committee, permanent committee, took action around that. So I'm going to add in those links now, but I know that we have limited time, and I don't know if there's time for questions or comments, but I would really love to hear your responses to some of my comments.
Yeah, we have a few minutes. Anybody have any questions? All right, Mike.
Hi, thank you. Good to see everyone. I just had a question because we have kind of several moving parts. You touched on a few, the MADC here
Yeah.
in New Jersey. We're forming our own MADC statewide. We also have Scholars at Risk. We've got Stand Together with Higher Ed. Um, it seems that there are many efforts, and I don't know how all of them are communicating with or talking to each other, or how you see the synergy of all these actions really formulating a robust defensive posture. So if you could comment on that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment because that has been one of our number one concerns is that we do not want to reinvent the wheel and we do not want to step on the feet of other people. We want to figure out how we can work together to be more powerful than the sum of our parts. And indeed, we have been working very closely with a number of different organizations, all of which you just mentioned, AAUP in particular. Um, there is a effort that is forming that is called, they're calling themselves right now the Five Pillars. We recently had a big meeting in Philadelphia, and it was many of those organizations you just mentioned, and many more, especially alumni and student organizations like Sunrise, Indivisible, et cetera, and then AAUP, us, Penn America, many others, to think about, okay, we need to work together. What will be the ways in which we can work in parallel without replicating the work? So that is beginning, but the conversation is still nascent. And of course, there's always lots of politics and surprisingly egos in this process. So that has been somewhat of a challenge. We're just, a newbie little organization, and we don't even want to be around, 3 years from now because we're full-time faculty, so we want to be able to do what we can right now to, you know, exponentiate the work of others. So that's kind of where we are on that.
Keith?
Keith.
So,
Hey, just quickly, and thanks, Jennifer, for all of the resources, the tracking and so forth. I'll make sure to put all these links on our NCFS page that we have for the webinar. I was just curious to get your take. For example, AAC and U, they have their statement on the Trump administration Compact for Excellence, Academic Excellence.
Yeah.
But they also have their statement, what do they call it? Higher Ed's Compact with America, Shared Principle for the Commons Good. I'm wondering to get your perspective on the importance of having a positive, affirmative statement about what we're about, and not just we don't like what's coming out of the Trump administration.
Right. Yeah. And there was a really great piece by Danielle. Her last name is escaping me, but at a think tank in Washington who talked about this. She said, this is a great opportunity for, the presentation of this compact to us is a perfect opportunity for us to come back with a real compact that would work for higher ed. And so part of the Reclaim the Narrative is about trying to have a more positive perspective rather than just a reactive perspective about the public good of the university. And then part of an entire half day at that Philadelphia meeting that I mentioned was dedicated to, okay, so when this is all done, like when the immediate threats are out of the way, how are we going to revitalize this institution of ours? Because we do have some problems, right? I mean, to deny that is ludicrous. We do have some problems, but I think people are in a very defensive stance right now where they feel like to deny it means to somehow take on the criticism that's being lodged at higher education. I don't think it should be that way. I think it's very smart for groups to be trying to think through, okay, what are the ways that we can work for change? And to be honest, I think that faculty senates have a role in this because you represent the faculty voice, as opposed to like the Heterodox Academy and all these other groups in Manhattan Institute that are coming out with their own ideas and then and trying to impose them through the government on bodies of higher ed. Michael.
Michael, oh, sorry. Michael, would you mind putting your comment or question in the chat so we can stay on task? Thank you very much. All right, so thank you very much, Jennifer. And we will now be moving on to Bruce Simon, who is at SUNY Fredonia, but also the University Faculty Senate and part of the Mutual Academic Defense Compact group that I sit with every other Tuesday when we have our phone call. All right, let me share your slides.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm actually
There you go.
today I'm actually today at SUNY Oneonta, and I'm sorry I was late, but we have a very packed schedule here because as you may know, SUNY has 64 campuses, and the University Faculty Senate is responsible for roughly half. Um, and so I'm crisscrossing the state. I've already put 1,700 miles on my new state car in less than 2 weeks, and with many more to come. I know Keith Landa has put a good number of miles on his drives as well over his 4 years as president of SUNY UFS. So um, Oneonta is a special place to me because I was invited to be part of an academic freedom panel that President Cardell organized. There was a representative from the Office of General Counsel. SUNY's chief diversity officer was there. There was somebody from labor relations, and then little old me. And then in April, I got elected to be the next president of UFS. So I've been on the job since July 1st. But I've been active in UFS for many, 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 many years and chair the governance committee. And if you go to the next slide, you could see two of the things that the governance committee spearheaded, um, both kind of responses to situations that were going on. So if you could click on that October 2023 toolkit link, we actually got Michael Barabay, who's the co-author, I hope that link works, um, uh, co-author of It's Not Free Speech with Jennifer Ruth. He spoke at our fall 2023 plenary. And yes, that's it. So we put together some resources, as you could see, including from Penn America. And then he took some notes on his presentation in the question and answer period, and then ended with some key quotations from the book that he and Jennifer wrote. So his key argument was that academic freedom is a faculty responsibility, and faculty should be taking an active role both in promoting it, but also in holding ourselves accountable. Um, often it's politicians or administrators or Title IX folks or, diversity, equity, and inclusion specialists who see their role as um, stepping in when issues of academic freedom arise, when there's a controversy about something a professor published or taught or said in public, right? Um, so yeah, so basically, uh, he was making a case for faculty taking the lead. And so this was in fall 2023. There were already many, many issues coming up through the states. If you could just keep scrolling down, you could show people just beyond the resources, kind of his bio, and you could just keep moving. I'm not going to stop on any single part of it. But in many states, right, there were attacks on, the freedom to learn, right, and on truth in history. So, his and Jennifer's book was kind of responding to state level things. It was in the halcyon days of pre-election, and certainly not 2025. So why don't we go next to the 2025 document, which instead of a toolkit, we thought of it as a resource guide. And basically, we started putting it together after the election, thinking that, well, this is likely going to be a very important issue given that professors are the enemy, right? So we wanted to have a much more extensive list of organizations that have been publishing recent documents. Like everything on this list, except for some of the scholarship that we cite in it in a later section, was what came out after the fall 2023 toolkit that we put together. So you could click on any of these links, um, and I'll make sure that the slides are shared. But we start with local, and then, if you keep scrolling down, you can see we move outside of New York to these national level organizations. So as you can see, and as you have lived, there's been a lot of issues around academic freedom that have come up since the election. So just at a very basic level, the governance committee and UFS thought, you know, let's help people wrap their heads around the changing landscape. I think that's all that I want to say about the toolkits because toolkits are great. So hopefully saving people some time for research. But if you go to the next slide, um, what what can governance bodies do to act on things? And I'm not going to take you through all these resolutions, but I'll go in reverse chronological order from the bottom of the page to the top. Well, actually, chronological order. Um, and basically, as you can see, we didn't do as much before 2024. We did support that AAUP joint statement that they did with a whole lot of other organizations, basically about the freedom to learn and teaching the truth of history back in fall of 2021. Um, when Title VI became such an issue, and when uh, now gubernatorial candidate Elise Stefanik started holding House hearings, you know, bringing presidents to task for their alleged failures to address anti-Semitism. Um, the SUNY System Administration came out with a very thoughtful post SFFA, the Supreme Court case, set of web pages, very thoughtful and proactive responses to letters of inquiry. And in support of that effort, we did a very short resolution just reminding folks of the importance of faculty involvement, of the importance of academic freedom and due process and shared governance in, of course, fulfilling our obligations under federal civil rights law. As you can see, though, in spring of 2025 and fall of 2025, we took an even more proactive role, partly in response to Jennifer Lundquist's, UMass resolution calling on a mutual academic defense compact with APLU institutions. We were influenced by Rutgers, but also we were influenced by our statewide union, United University Professions, passing a resolution of their own. At first, we thought we were only, oh, is the screen not shared? I'm seeing the slide when I look at it, by the way. Okay, great. So, essentially, we passed this Defense of Higher Education resolution that tried to pull together like a New York centric, a public university centric, a public good use centric vision of what mutual academic defense compact could look like. We had held a conference that Keith was the lead organizer on in February of 2025 called Public Good Use, Strengthening the Case for Public Higher Education. It was a great, convening of over 300 people, mostly from New York, but we had folks from Massachusetts and other states present on just this concept that higher education is for the public good. If you could go back to the previous slide, though, just oh, I think you're going forward. Yep, back to number two. This idea of being proactively part of a defense, um, was part of the strategy. You could see it continuing into the fall with our defending shared governance in Texas, where we're like, hey, yes, you will have an access to a copy of the slides, but we decided, hey, we are relatively well off in New York State with, you know, basically blue everywhere you look at statewide elected offices and the leadership of the legislature, and so why don't we take a more forward-looking, kind of let's mess with Texas approach? So if you could click on the Texas one, I did want to zero in on one aspect of one of the resolves there because I think it kind of encapsulates nicely um, what we're trying to accomplish, where we're not just calling out like bad behavior, and there's plenty of bad behavior in Texas, as everybody here knows well. But if you go down to the resolves, I think it's on page 2 or 3. Um, yeah, page 3. So this third resolved, where we have charged me to work with a bunch of different organizations in New York State, in consultation with the authorized representatives of faculty, staff, and students in Texas to explore concrete ways of both supporting those folks in Texas, but also advocating for New York State to set a national example. This is in keeping with our Mutual Academic Defense Compact resolution, but it's really like building on all these conversations with the MADC group, thinking about, well, we haven't yet succeeded in getting many campus administrations or system leaders to be super out there and super proactive and be loud and proud about being part of a mutual academic defense compact. But what we can do is take the lead ourselves. So this idea of bringing together unions, groups like the CUNY Alliance to Defend Higher Education, which is kind of like a stand together group within CUNY, to look at potential contractual, legislative, and or constitutional initiatives to kind of enshrine academic freedom and other principles of foundational principles that make universities universities, in something stronger than just like a bylaw or a handbook. So this is something that's in process that I'm happy to talk more about later. But let's zoom back out. Resolutions are great. Um, we've continued this path though of pointing out things that we don't like happening in other states, and then kind of calling on our system administration to set a different tone, to set a national example. So whether it's with the safeguarding due process and privacy, um, it's calling out the release of personally identifiable information by the UC administration, and basically asking for clarification from our system leadership under what circumstances they would do the same, cautioning them against entering into any voluntary agreements, et cetera, et cetera. So with the SUNY-wide doxing policy and photography recording policy, this is at the heart of academic freedom, right? Like the freedom to teach and to learn. So that can be impinged upon if everybody's afraid that they're going to become the next bad guy on libs of TikTok or something like that, as happened to one of my colleagues in the philosophy department at Fredonia. Let's go to the next slide, though. Resolutions are one thing, statements are another. We wanted to, um, you know, make a statement about the big bad bill. So on Independence Day, we released a statement on this, a declaration on the state of shared governance. Most recently, we called for folks to oppose the Mailman-McMahon Compact, building on the statements and the petitions that we thought were nation leading. So let's just skip ahead though to the next slide. Um, this is where I wanted to highlight a couple of issues at CUNY and at UC. You could look at these links for yourselves, but essentially administrators have started taking up, on the one hand, yes, it is Project 2025 language that academic freedom is not absolute. On the other hand, since AUP, kind of enshrined the principle of academic freedom, there's always been responsibilities associated with it. But there have been recent assertions by administrators on both ends of the Atlantic and the Pacific that they get to define what the bounds are, they get to define what the violations are. And not just the PSC, which is the union for the CUNY faculty, but also like the Borough of Manhattan Community College Academic Freedom Committee released a statement, which unfortunately is not on the web, so I couldn't link to it. But this is a live issue currently at CUNY, and hopefully I'll be able to go to their plenary on December 2nd to see how this continues to play out. In UC, this is a live issue as well. I won't say more about it, but you could read Michael Moranza's excellent overview, which also has links to many other things. Let me go to some outstanding questions, though, in closing, and to leave a little time for questions. Obviously, the relation between academic freedom and free speech, the relation between academic freedom and Title VI, and just expanded out Title IX. The difference between principles and practices and between protections that exist on paper and real world vulnerabilities. Like we all know in a majority contingent faculty nationally, there are practical limitations on academic freedom. If you're an at-will employee who could be fired for any reason or no reason, you have much less protection than somebody with the protections of tenure. However, like as we pointed out with the resolution that was about videotaping in the classroom, and anti-doxing, everybody's vulnerable to some degree. So how can we enshrine, whether it's in bylaws or in contracts or in legislation, um, vigorous protections and maybe even academic freedom for all academic workers? What would that look like? I was a delegate for United University Professions, our statewide union, the 4 years, to HELU, Higher Education Labor United, and was in conversations with the Politics and Policy Committee and friends on it about what would expanding the notion of academic freedom, so it's not like a class privilege or that it's a privilege only for a certain sliver of the professoriate. But what would it look like for if it was extended to everyone? How would you do that? And on that question of how you would do it, it goes back to that resolution where it's like we need to be creative. My dream is, can we get something in the New York State Constitution? Because that would be the hardest to dislodge, right? We got some very vigorous human rights law language in the New York State, Constitution. So why not something about the importance of something foundational like academic freedom? I think my last note will be cautionary, which is that the courts are all over the place when it comes to deciding cases. So being very thoughtful about when and where you go to legal means, to judicial means, lawsuits to protect academic freedom versus when you go to other means is something to be thinking about. So I'll just stop there and open it up to questions and comments.
Right. Michael, did you get yours posted in the chat? All right. Anybody have any questions for Bruce? I will post his, or probably, go, Matthew, do you have a comment?
Me?
Yeah, you
Oh, yes,
unmuted,
yes,
so
yes. Yeah, I just want, first of all, hello, everybody. I think, oh, John, I thought I'll ask the chair of the University Faculty Senate to apprise this group about our engagement with the provost on the matter of academic freedom at our most recent plenary.
On the spot. Bruce brought up an issue that's been brewing at CUNY, was led by our provost, but really traces back to the Office of General Counsel. And in the last slide, Bruce mentioned academic freedom in Title VI. CUNY entered into a voluntary settlement agreement on Title VI with the Biden OCR. And as part of that, there was some mandatory training around Title VI. And in that mandatory training for faculty were the words that the provost sent out to all the faculty, and there was a great exception taken to it. And I'll note just today that one of the things that the provost wrote was that you should consult your dean if you are worried about academic freedom concerns. And today, either in Inside Higher Ed or the Chronicle of Higher Ed, there was an article about a professor, an adjunct, who consulted their dean, and then the dean weaponized what was consulted with and turned around and fired that faculty member. So there are real issues here. I'm not sure if they'll be as exciting at our plenary as Bruce is making it out to be, but that remains to be seen.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and if I could say something in closing, I mean, one thing to keep in mind, SUNY system is 64 campuses. There are dozens of CUNY campuses, both senior and community college in the same system. Mutual academic defense across all these campuses and within the system is an ongoing issue. So we may not have been taking as much of a national leadership role, but we've been focused kind of internally. And part of the reason why I'm visiting so many campuses is to spread the word about the importance of shared governance and academic freedom, to see what issues are bubbling up on each campus. Tomorrow, I'm going to be at Binghamton for our Realizing the Promise of Public Good U tour. where we have a focus on working through these tabletop exercises, 10 scenarios that Candace Faison, the president of Faculty Council of Community Colleges, and I have put together to get people around the table from different campuses, even different sectors, because I see Brenda from Stony Brook, an R1. We have colleges of technology. We have regional public universities like the ones that Keith Land and I are at. We have community colleges. We have 30 community colleges, right? So it is a never-ending, shifting landscape of intra-campus and inter-campus and system-wide relationships that need to be managed.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. For the sake of time, moving on to Amy Reid. Amy, I'll share your slides and just let me know when to move forward.
Okay. So first, I want to thank Catherine for inviting me to be here with you all today. I'm Amy Reid, and I come to you from Penn America, where I'm the interim program director of our Freedom to Learn program, where we track and push back against state legislative initiatives to censor higher education. So we started out this presentation with Jen talking about the federal and national landscape. And then Bruce spoke about how the SUNY system and how individual campuses can organize to push back. And what I'm going to try and do is talk about the state level landscape for educational censorship. Okay. So first off, I just want to note, Penn America is primarily a free speech organization. We celebrate literature and the rights and freedoms that make it possible, which includes academic freedom. We have a growing team active in higher education, and that includes me. I joined Penn just about a year ago. After 30 years teaching at New College of Florida, a school that some of you may have heard of. I there was chair of the faculty for the last year and a half of my tenure, which meant that I was a member of the Advisory Council of Faculty Senates for the state of Florida. So I'm very happy to speak with you all today because I know the importance of faculty senates, both on a statewide level and then on our campuses. So in terms of my work at Penn America, one of the things I do is I support a growing coalition of advocates for academic freedom nationwide. These are primarily faculty, but also some students and staff and civil society representatives who come together monthly for discussions about strategy, about what people are facing on their campuses and in their states, and how people can organize to push back. Our next meeting is a week from tomorrow on November 21st. If any of you would be interested in attending, please send me an email. My email I popped in the chat earlier on. It'll be again at the end of this, and you will have access to my slides on the website. So one of the bits of bad news I want to share is that in the 5 years that Penn has been tracking higher education censorship, 2025 stands out as a banner year for bad things that happened in state legislatures across the country. There were over 70 bills introduced across the states in 26 different states that would have censored higher education either directly as gag orders or indirectly. 22 of them were passed in 16 different states. Those included at least 7 gag orders, which are rules that specifically prohibit discussions of certain topics in classrooms, and then 21 mechanisms that used indirect processes to censor higher education. These can include DEI bans, limits on general education, tenure, accreditation, shared governance, intellectual diversity, and institutional neutrality. All of these things together serve to chill the climate for free expression on our campuses. On our website, and you have the QR code there, you can find a blog that details all of these numbers and the primary sort of themes we saw coming out of the legislative session. On to the next slide. So because we're supposed to be talking about academic freedom here, I just pulled together a few different sources for definitions of academic freedom. At the top, my working definition of academic freedom, and this is based on my work at Penn, but also my work as a professor over the years, is that academic freedom matters because it protects our students' freedom to learn. Okay, if faculty are able to research and teach up to the ethical standards of our fields, then our students have access to an education free from government censorship. And I think especially when we're talking to broader audiences about what matters, that needs to be front and center. You can look to the AAUP or to the European higher education area for other definitions. I'll also point to the Magna Carta Universitatum, which is again another European-based organization that promotes academic freedom. And they say significantly that research and teaching must be intellectually and morally independent of all political influence and economic interests. And I think that's something very important for us to keep in mind as we have increasing pressure to focus on neoliberal outcomes and return on investment for our areas of study. I'm going fast, but I wanted to make sure we could get through everything. So on here, you just have a whole bunch of blogs and statements that Penn has put out over this past year. Again, for the first thing, I'm noting our blog that came out in July, which is summative of the legislative initiatives that we saw coming out in state legislatures across the spring. Earlier in the year, we started out in March with a blog that talked about the way in which state legislatures were taking away the authority from faculty, undermining shared governance, and in some cases directly attacking the existence of faculty senates. Texas Senate Bill 37 is a prime example of that. It was passed, I believe, in April. We wrote our blog in April about it. It's a bill that does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is that it ensures that faculty senates can only be advisory, that faculty senates have to be primarily appointed members with no more than half elected from different units within the college, the rest appointed by the president. Okay. And then that faculty senates aren't allowed to make any actual policy decisions. They can be advisory only. Okay. And then later we saw that Texas actually just sort of got rid of most of their faculty senates, right? They evacuated them. Some have been reconstituted at other universities. They haven't at all. So we're sort of seeing in Texas, and I know that there are some people in this meeting from different Texas units. We've seen a real destruction of faculty senates, but Texas is not the only place where this type of legislation is coming to the fore. Okay. The other three things I mentioned here, in Indiana, we've seen several different cases of late where faculty are being censored or removed from their classrooms for their political speech. The blog that's referenced there deals with the case of Ben Robinson from last spring, but just this week, another faculty member was actually walked out of her classroom in the middle of a class, which is stunning. Earlier in September, we saw a faculty member, Melissa McCool, removed from her teaching at Texas A&M. And then her faculty chair and dean, and finally the president of the campus, all removed as part of a statewide witch hunt. And that case was really stunning for the way in which social media played a really accelerating role. We know that since the middle of September, over 50 faculty members nationwide have been sanctioned as a result of their social media posts in response to the murder of Charlie Kirk. Several have been fired. Several have been temporarily removed from their classes or otherwise censored. This is something that we all need to be concerned about. And then also from the University of Houston, and I think there may be someone here from the University of Houston. Just a few weeks ago, there was the cancellation of a graduate course that was required for the program in the Masters of Social Work degree. And the course was removed without any faculty consideration. Administrators posted that they were canceling the class. From what we were able to tell, there was no consultation with the faculty and the School of Social Work, and certainly no consultation with the Faculty Senate at Texas. If faculty are about controlling the curriculum, this is something to worry about. Next slide, we can go on. Okay, this is just a bunch of resources from PEN America. Every year we put out a censored classroom report that goes more in depth into the ways in which we see legislative on the state level and increasingly on the federal level attacking higher education and academic freedom. Our report this year, which really will have a strong focus on federal policy, will be out in December. We also have a campus free speech guide. The current version is going to be updated shortly. That's a really useful tool if you're trying to promote free expression on your campus. I do want to note the fifth bullet down, just day before yesterday, I believe, we posted a fact sheet about the Compact for Higher Education, which I refer to as a coercive compact. I think Jen used the language coercion and extortion. There really is no carrot with this compact. It's all stick. Okay. And so every school should be well advised to stay away from it. And then I want to point to a pledge to our democracy, which is a statement in support of building the coalition necessary that includes higher education and other sectors to defend our democracy in this moment. It was an idea led by the Champions of Higher Education, which is a coalition that I coordinate of over 300 retired college and university presidents, 140 of whom signed this statement and are working actively with us to try and build the coalition necessary across sectors through higher education, but actually out beyond it to legal profession and business, judiciary, in order to save our democracy, which is what's at risk at the moment. Last slide. Yay, we reached the end and a few minutes left. I wasn't a sprinter when I ran track, but I feel like I sort of sprinted through this one for you. I want to thank you for your time and attention. The QR code will take you to the Penn website where you can find all sorts of information. And again, I really hope that you'll reach out to me. I'll pop my email in the chat one more time. And if anyone has questions, I'm all ears.
All right, we have some time left if anyone has questions for Amy or Jennifer or Bruce during this time period. And
I
we
do
can
have a quick
also,
question.
yes, go ahead, David.
We're in Alabama at Jacksonville State, and I am curious to know, Amy, especially yours, but other opinions on best practices for navigating the sort of political landscape we have, because Alabama is not as bad as Texas and Florida, but we're certainly in the running, and we're trying to walk a fine line on campus between how much do we push, how much do we save our political capital?
I think that's a really important question, and there isn't one answer to that. I think everyone should be well advised that you do need to follow the laws of your state. Okay. But there are also times when laws are passed or jawboning occurs where legislators are pushing administrators to enforce policies that aren't reflected in law, but are sort of their aspirational censorship initiatives. And there we have some room to push back. Okay. A couple years ago, when I was at New College, there was a law passed that you had to have single-sex bathroom, or you had to have single-sex bathrooms. And our campus had a number of gender-neutral bathrooms to serve our community. And then the administration sent out a notice to everyone on the campus enjoining all faculty and staff to help enforce that policy, right? That telling students that faculty and staff are going to be enforcing that policy is a clear overstep. And so we as faculty spoke out loudly, saying that we were not, literally we said we're not going to be part of the PP patrol. And we made sure that students got that message. Our administration tried to censor the messages we were sending out to students, and so we persisted because that was a place where we really needed to hold the line. So I think people have to sort of judge where are the places where you need to be conscientious and aware of what can happen, and where are places that you can push back. In Florida, there's a law that allows for the surreptitious recording of faculty lectures if a student wants to file a complaint against you. And that's totally at odds with the general policy in Florida that says that any recordings have to be a to consent situation. And so one thing we did was we made sure to inform students that our classes were not lectures, but were conversations, and that they were not allowed to record other students, right? And just sort of having that type of conversation so that students are aware that there are some limits. And it also opens up a space for conversations about the dynamics that are going on. So, and finally, I'll just say I had to leave the state of Florida. So I don't know that I'm necessarily the best person to give you guidance if you're really trying to stay in Alabama.
Well, you know,
I'm a
I've had,
refugee.
you know, to build on what Amy was talking about, I've had some private conversations with folks in southern states who are facing their own issues, like being in right to work states, you know, obviously not having the government on their side. One of the strategies I've seen, you know, that work at the campuses that were originally targeted with the federal compact was to work with students, to work with alumni, to work even with parents. You know, people who might have a little bit more political capital than faculty. So to kind of build these broad coalitions and maybe not always have faculty be at the front lines of every issue.
Additional comments or questions? Thanks, David. Additional comments or questions?
I just wanted to follow up with David to ask, do you have an AAUP advocacy chapter at your institution?
We do not. I was just looking at that. I could join the at-large chapter, but there's only 4 universities in Alabama that have an AEUP chapter.
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend reaching out to the faculty at the other 4
Okay.
chapters of the other universities and get a sense from them how that played out when they formed. I think there are ways that an AAUP advocacy chapter, or if you want to start a Stand Together chapter, can be very quiet and work behind the scenes. I love Bruce's idea of working with alumni. Of course, you have to be very careful as a faculty member initiating that, like initiating students to take the lead. So what I find is we're actually preparing a number of slides for faculty to use for their classrooms, just to talk about, what's happening, how does higher ed work? How does the scientific alliance with the federal government work in terms of funding? What is academic freedom, et cetera? And faculty can then use these slides in class. It doesn't have to be specifically about the university. And then what often happens is that students want to talk more about this. And so when students then come to you and say, oh, how can I get involved? That's a great way to then, point them to the Sunshine chapter that might be forming somewhere in the state, or to let them know they could form that. Or there's a number of student chapters and alumni chapters that are now bubbling up, which is really exciting. So Crimson Courage, which is the Harvard alumni chapter, incredibly powerful. They had like 14,000 signatures on the amicus brief with that Harvard filed against the federal government, all alumni signatures. And now they were one of the groups that we're working with for this larger coalition. They're interested in working up with us and AUP, with all of our chapters and teams across universities, in mobilizing alumni in the same way that they did with Harvard. And these people, they are organizers. They have their chops. They've been doing this for a long time. They're really good at what they do. And so I see a lot of hope in going in that direction.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are coming to a close. I want to be respectful of people's time. We will also schedule a webinar in the spring, and you'll receive an email about that. And then the National Council on Faculty Senates meets usually as a body in person in May. We have not set dates or location yet, but we are hoping to do so relatively soon. And I'll send out an email on that as well. Thank you, everyone, for attending. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me or the National Council on Faculty Senates. I'm sure Amy would appreciate emails as well, and Jennifer and Bruce. So please enjoy your weekend, and hopefully I'll see you in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Amy, Jennifer, and Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
You too.